Welcome videos on how to write a comparative essay. My name is Francesca and I'm a third year undergraduate studying English literature at Lancaster University, and some of my interests include Jane Austen and 21st century criticism. I really hope these videos will be useful to you as you start to prepare for your A-level exams, whatever format you're sitting them in. Online learning is hard, so these videos are here to make it easy for you to get the best marks you possibly can. These videos directly reference the AQA Language and Literature A-Level, with examples from the Paris Anthology. And to get the most out of this resource, you'll need your anthology to hand. If you want another exam board, take a look at your own texts, whether that be poetry and prose, to complete some of the activities. These videos should be useful for general advice on how to write a comparative A-Level essay, so there are transferable options for those on any other exam boards. But whatever exam board you're following, these sorts of skills will crop up in any further study that you undertake. I completed a similar exam for my own English language and literature A-Level, but with OCR, so I know that they follow very similar mark schemes. My anthology exam was comparing a Jamie Oliver recipe out of his book to a transcript of him talking about his life, so that was an interesting exam. The course will be split into 3 videos. The first on technique, the second on comparing form, context and mode, and then the third on comparing narrative, tone and lexis. By the end of this series, I hope you will have some surefire planning techniques that you can use in timed essays that produce high-level and sophisticated comparative essays. Let's begin with looking at our mark scheme. This is taken directly from the AQA website, and the 3 assessment objectives we need to focus on are AO1, AO3 and AO4 because they make up the 40 marks that are awarded for this question. AO1 means we need to apply concepts and methods from a wide variety of linguistic study, as well as providing coherent and clarified terminology when identifying evidence. It's simple enough, but the use of terminology should be precise and relevant to our argument. AO3 sees us understanding the significance of the context in which these texts are produced and received. These last 2 verbs are crucial. Context, in this case, doesn't just mean historical, but concerned with the mode and genre as well as audience reception. In other words, how does a piece of text mode influence the way listeners and readers digest it? AO4 asks us to explore connections across texts informed by these linguistic concepts and methods we have cultivated in the other 2 assessment objectives. Arguably, this last one is the most crucial because this is exactly what the question is asking us to do. Keeping your 2 texts evenly fluid with one another will produce the complexity and sophistication needed to get you top marks. So my first tip would be to keep your text use even. Don't allow one text to take precedence over the other because you like it more, and don't write about one text more than the other one. This is a technique that I learned at A-level, and I continually use it at degree level, even in my dissertation, my third year essays, for my comparative work, because it produces really nuanced distinctions between texts and proves that you've been reading closely and then perceptively making an argument about it. So there are 2 ways in which you can use the triangle technique to construct a point, either by proving that 2 different techniques produce the same effect, or that the same technique garners 2 different effects. Let me make up an example. I'm going to be using the Paris City Guide and Bill Bryson's narrative. So, both texts use superlative language but with different effects. The travel video uses them to emboss Paris with a set of positive characteristics to encourage tourism, such as most fashionable, the greatest gallery, epitome of romance, whereas Bryson uses them to emphasise the recklessness of the French stereotype he has cultivated, and he calls them the most pathologically aggressive drivers. Keeping the same text, let's move on to the other triangle. Same effect, different technique. Both want to conjure the French stereotype, but do so using different effects. The video uses multiple techniques to emphasise the Parisian identity, including, but not limited to, the power of 3 and voice emphasis on the personal pronoun to invite the tourist to become part of the social identity. Bryson, however, calls upon somebody else. He calls on Christophe Hibbert's words from the Grand Tour to confirm his own stereotype about the Parisian being bad drivers. He's directly using intertextuality to substantiate his own argument. So in this case, make sure to stress that these different or similar techniques produce these different meanings and reception. Already we're starting to combine AO1 terminology with AO3 contextual reception, as well as with AO4 comparison. So my second tip would be to make sure that you not only include evidence, but that it directly proves your point about its effect, its reception, or its meaning. Take a few minutes to look at Stories Are Waiting in Paris, which is text 1 in my anthology, and text 4, The Most Beautiful Walk in the World. Use the two triangle techniques to draw out some examples of technique and effects. If you want to make your triangles more specific to a question, try thinking about this one that I made up. Compare how text A and text B present ideas of movement in Paris. And you can pause the video now. So hopefully you'll now have an example of a similarity and a difference, but they are significantly interrelated with meaning and reception. So we have our technique nailed, but how do we join together our triangles? How do we join together our points to make a cohesive essay? To make sure we address AO4, we need a comprehensive list of connectives and conjunctions. Can you think of any? Any spring to mind? At the moment, I have an overabundance of nevertheless and yet in my essays. I think they're fantastic conjunctions. These markers are integral to helping our examiner navigate our argument like a signpost. We can't expect our reader to get from the place of our introduction to the place of our conclusion without signposts. These connectives don't just compare and link, like the ones on the slides. However, on the other hand, conversely, they can reinforce your point, moreover, furthermore, additionally, and as well as exemplifying it. Consequently, accordingly, therefore. I recommend making a list of them as you start prepping for your exams. Having a varied list of connectives and conjunctions will make your writing more fluid, easier to read, and importantly, easier to mark. Examiners will see straight away that you are making connections, you are fulfilling AO4, and keeping text moving together fluidly throughout your essay. I will be talking more specifically about using jargon and terminology in video number 3, but it's important to remember that terminology shouldn't just be regurgitated into your writing. It should be used precisely in conjunction with your argument. You should be looking at specific quotations to back up your argument. So if you're saying that a metaphor helps characterise a stereotypical Parisian, quote the metaphor, detail how it produces that effect. A rule I like to follow is that if you can't evidence a point, then there's no point including it. It will be taking up valuable time in your exam and space in your argument that you could be giving to a more substantiated point. Moving to consider how to maximise your time in an exam, I will always recommend students taking 5 or 10 minutes to plan. Always. It may seem like you're wasting time, but having gone through so many timed exams in my educational career, I will always plan a response. My plans tend to look something like this. My introduction, like what am I trying to prove? Then I ask myself, how many points can I write realistically in this time? Probably around 3 in detail. Remember that quality points will always get you more marks than a high quantity of shallow points. My conclusion says that I have proved what I was trying to argue in my introduction. And a side note, if you are allowed to write on your exam papers, print them out, put them side by side, write on them, annotate them. These annotations, physical, digital, will really encourage you to compare text quite literally side by side. So making a plan means that when you begin writing, you don't need to stop and think about your next point, which can sometimes cause disjunct writing. So I've given you the tools now to start constructing an essay. So let's make a quick 5-minute plan. Here is the 2018 paper. Text A is an extract from Neither Here Nor There, Travels in Europe by Bill Bryson. Text B is an extract from The Walking Tour of the Louvre Museum. Compare and contrast how the writer of text A and the speakers of text B present the experiences of visiting the Louvre. So I want you now to make take 5 minutes, time yourself to make a short plan, however many points you feel is realistic for you to write in the time limit, maybe 3 or 4, to prove your hypothesis about the experiences of the Louvre. So you can pause the video now and do that. Right, so you should now have a sense of your overall structure before you've even started writing. And believe in this plan, believe in your writing, because now you know exactly where you're going to end up and you won't go off on any tangents. And you will have used that 5 minutes productively to make sure your argument is structured and clear. I've used the triangle technique to write a point for us to have a look at. And before I reveal my writing, feel free to list what's wrong with it too. It's not perfect. How do you think that you would make it better? So the triangle I worked from was the two different techniques, same effect. So technique one I used was active verbs, critical similes. Technique two was a metaphor, and their dual effect was characterising crowds of tourists in the Louvre as a powerful mass distinct from the author. Hopefully this will demonstrate how powerful thinking about comparisons in this way are, and how you can tick off all three assessment objectives in every single point. Let's take a look. The text used different techniques to characterise the tourists inside the Louvre as one faceless mass. Text A uses the active looming verbs to unite the tourists under one body. Bryson uses the verbs swarm and seized in relation to the physicality of the crowd, denoting not just their power but connoting their identity as moving as one mass. Similarly, he conveys the crowd size and huge distance between him and the Mona Lisa by positioning the reader in the Louvre with him using the simile like a postage stamp. However, text B anticipates the listener's image, antedating Venus de Milo as floating above the sea of worshipping tourists. This metaphor not only unifies the crowd of people into a fluid sea, but transforms the tourists into an exhibit in themselves. Both authors use these different techniques to separate themselves and their readers/listeners from the other tourists in the Louvre, despite being tourists themselves. Moreover, the use of the verb raise, floating above with the preposition, relies on the listener's presence at the Louvre to convey information, whereas Bryson in text A must use an amusing simile like a postage stamp to position his readers. It is worth noting that text B's reception would be while the listener was at the Louvre, whereas text A's readers are unlikely to be in Paris at all. This significantly affects the way writers and speakers convey the positional information of exhibits. This is by no means model writing, but I have tried to include all three assessment objectives, which I've colour-coded for you on those slides. I've also tried to keep my text use fluid and equal. These triangles should help ideas run smoothly from one to another as you build conviction in your argument. So we've collected these 3 tips to use alongside our triangle technique. 1, keep your text use even. 2, always include evidence and always connect it to your argument. And 3, making a plan will help you structure your writing better. If you'd liked the practice, you can go away and time yourself writing from the plan that you made earlier. The next video in this series will really focus on comparing mode and genre, helping you to craft sophisticated combinations of AO3 and AO4. Thank you for coming along today. I have full faith in you for your upcoming exams. Good luck. I put my email on the slides if you have any questions about revision, about the A-level exams, about the anthology exam, or any of your other ones. Please don't hesitate to email me and I will get back to you as soon as I can. So hopefully see you in the next video.